The mahogany dining table had belonged to Leo's mother. It was a solid, hand-carved piece of craftsmanship that radiated warmth, but tonight it felt like a cold slab of ice. Across from Leo sat Beatrice, his stepmother of 6 years, flanked by her 2 biological children, Mason and Chloe. Leo, 22, and still wearing his grease-stained uniform from the local garage where he apprenticed, stared at the piece of paper Beatrice had slid across the table. It was a resident contribution agreement, at $800 a month. Leo asked, his voice low. "Beatrice, I'm an apprentice. I make barely more than that after taxes, and I do all the maintenance on this house. I fixed the HVAC last week. That would have cost you $3,000. Beatrice took a delicate sip of her Chardonnay. She was a woman who wore pearls to breakfast and treated the world like a service staff she was perpetually dissatisfied with. "Leo, darling, let's be realistic. You're an adult now. Your father has been gone for nearly a year. This house is a massive burden to maintain, and Mason and Chloe need their space to focus." Mason, 24, didn't look up from his gaming laptop. He had spent the last 3 years finding his brand. As a streamer, which mostly involved screaming at teenagers through a headset and drinking enough energy drinks to power a small village. Chloe, 19, was busy scrolling through a high-end fashion site, adding things to a cart she expected Beatrice to pay for. "Focus on what?" Leo snapped. "Mason hasn't had a job since the Obama administration, and Chloe dropped out of community college after 2 weeks because the vibes were off." "Don't be jealous, Leo," Chloe chimed in without looking up. "Not everyone is built for manual labor. Some of us have aesthetics to maintain. The point is," Beatrice said, her eyes turning cold, "this is my house. Your father left everything to me in his will. If you want to live under this roof, you pay your share. Otherwise, you're welcome to find a studio apartment in the city. I hear the industrial district is very authentic." Leo felt a sharp, twisting pain in his chest. It wasn't just about the money. His father, Arthur, had been a brilliant but sentimental man. When he'd married Beatrice after Leo's mother passed, he'd wanted a complete family. But Arthur had died suddenly of a heart attack, and the transition of his estate had been a whirlwind of grief and confusion. The will had been a simple document, or so Leo had been told by Beatrice's hand-picked lawyer. Everything went to the surviving spouse. Leo had stayed to keep the house running. The Victorian-era plumbing and the temperamental electrical grid needed his constant attention. Now he was being treated like a squatter in his own childhood home. "You have until the 1st of the month," Beatrice said, standing up. "Cash or cashier's check, no exceptions." As they left the room, Mason purposely bumped Leo's shoulder. "Better get those overtime hours in, grease monkey. Mom's thinking of turning your room into a yoga studio for Chloe." Leo sat in the dark for a long time after they left. He looked at the scratches on the mahogany table. He remembered his father teaching him how to sand wood right there. He remembered the secret compartments his father used to hide treasure, in old coins or chocolate bars. His father was a man of puzzles and precautions. He wouldn't have left Leo with nothing. He wouldn't have been that careless. The planning began that night. Leo didn't go to bed. He went to the basement. His father had been a high-end estate jeweler, a man who understood the value of things that couldn't be seen. In the back of the workshop, hidden behind a false panel of pegboard, was Arthur's private safe. Leo had known about it for years, but out of respect, he had never opened it after the funeral. He dialed the combination his mother's birthday. The heavy door groaned open. Inside weren't stacks of cash. Instead, there was a single leather-bound ledger and a series of high-quality digital scans of documents. As Leo read through the ledger, a cold, predatory smile began to form on his face. His father hadn't been careless. He had been terrified. The notes in the margins, dated months before his death, spoke of Beatrice's unquenchable thirst for capital and her unfortunate associations. Arthur had discovered that Beatrice was systematically funneling money out of their joint accounts into an offshore trust. In response, Arthur hadn't confronted her. He knew she would just hide it better. Instead, he had performed a masterpiece of legal architecture. Leo spent the next 3 weeks being the perfect victim. He worked double shifts. He took the insults from Mason. He ignored Chloe using his expensive tools to distress her designer jeans. He even paid the first $800 in cash, tucked into a neat envelope. "See," Beatrice sneered as she took the money, "a little pressure builds character." "You're right, Beatrice," Leo said, his voice humble. "I'm learning a lot about character lately." While they slept, Leo was busy. He wasn't just a mechanic, he was a restorer. He spent his nights in the attic and the crawl spaces. He made 3 phone calls. One to a specialized estate attorney in the city who didn't play golf with Beatrice's cronies. One to a high-end real estate liquidator, and one to a private investigator. The most important discovery was the Inter Vivos I trust. His father hadn't left the house to Beatrice. He had placed the house, the family business, and the bulk of his $2 million liquid investment portfolio into a trust that triggered upon his death. Beatrice had been shown a *draft* of a will. The actual, filed document, the one Arthur had secretly finalized and moved to a different county's registry, stipulated that Beatrice had a life estate. In the house, only as long as she remained the primary caregiver and provider for Arthur's heirs and dependents. But there was a poison pill. The trust had a conduct and solvency clause. If the trustee Beatrice attempted to extort the beneficiaries Leo, or if she was found to be committing financial malfeasance against the estate, the life estate was immediately revoked, and the entirety of the assets, including the $2 million, would bypass her and go directly to Leo. Beatrice's demand for rent was the extort trigger. Her offshore transfers were the malfeasance. Leo just needed to set the stage for the public reveal. The climax occurred on a Tuesday afternoon. Beatrice was hosting a charity committee luncheon. She loved these events. They allowed her to play the role of the grieving, philanthropic widow while drinking expensive gin. Mason was in the living room, his headset on, screaming at his monitor. Chloe was in the foyer, posing for selfies in a dress she had bought with Leo's rent money. There was a firm knock at the door. Leo, who had taken the day off, opened it. 2 men in dark suits stood there, accompanied by a woman holding a clipboard and a very confused-looking local sheriff. "Can I help you?" Beatrice asked, gliding toward the door, her face a mask of polite concern. "Beatrice Vane," the woman asked. "I'm Sarah Jenkins from the county auditor's office. This is Mr. Sterling, representing the Arthur Vane Testamentary Trust." "The what?" Beatrice's smile faltered. "There must be a mistake. My husband's estate was settled months ago." "Actually," Mr. Sterling said, stepping forward and opening a leather portfolio, "the estate you settled was based on a revoked draft. We have the filing from the Superior Court. We also have the record of the $800 rent payment you coerced from Leo Vane on the 1st of the month." Beatrice laughed, a shrill, nervous sound. "That was a contribution to the household. Leo is an adult, under Section 4(2) of the actual trust." Sterling continued, his voice like a gavel. "Any attempt to charge a primary beneficiary for residence in a life estate property constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. It's also known as self-dealing. Mason wandered out of the living room, scratching his stomach. "Mom, why is the Wi-Fi off? I'm in the middle of a raid." "The Wi-Fi is off because the account has been transferred," Leo said, stepping out from behind the auditors. He looked at Mason, then at Chloe, who had gone pale. "What are you talking about, you little rat?" Beatrice hissed, the mask finally slipping. "I'll have you on the street by tonight." "Actually, Mrs. Vane," the sheriff intervened, "it's the other way around. Mr. Sterling has an emergency court order. Due to the financial irregularities found in your offshore accounts, which, by the way, were traced back to the estate's primary capital, your life estate has been terminated, effective immediately." "Immediately?" Beatrice gasped. "You can't do this. I have guests. The guests are leaving," Leo said, gesturing to the dining room where the charity committee was already scurrying toward the back door, sensing a scandal. Leo turned to Mason. "And Mason, your streaming equipment, it was bought with funds embezzled from my father's business account. It's been seized as part of the estate recovery. You have 20 minutes to pack a bag of personal clothes. Anything else stays." "You can't do this," Chloe shrieked. "My clothes, my aesthetic." "Your aesthetic was funded by my father's sweat," Leo said coldly. "You can keep the clothes you're wearing. The rest goes to the liquidator to pay back the $1. $2 million your mother tried to hide in the Cayman Islands." The next 20 minutes were a blur of screaming, crying, and the sound of suitcases being packed in a frenzy. Beatrice tried to charm the sheriff, then she tried to threaten him, and finally, she sat on the mahogany table and refused to move. "This is my house," she wailed. "No," Leo said, walking over to her. He reached under the lip of the table and pressed a small, hidden latch his father had shown him when he was 7. A small drawer popped out. Inside was a set of spare keys and a photo of Leo and his parents. "This is my home," Leo corrected. "And you were just a guest who overstayed her welcome." The sheriff escorted Beatrice out. She didn't have her pearls. They had been identified as estate assets purchased after Arthur's death with stolen funds. She left in a pair of cheap flip-flops, followed by her 2 stunned, silent children. The silence that followed was the most beautiful thing Leo had ever heard. He sat at the mahogany table, the $800 cash envelope sitting in front of him. He wouldn't be needing it. The $2 million was being returned to the trust, and as the sole trustee now, Leo had already arranged for the pension funds of his father's old employees to be topped up first. He looked around the foyer. It was dusty and filled with the ghosts of the last 6 years, but it was his. His phone buzzed. It was a text from the private investigator. Beatrice and the kids just checked into a Motel 6. Mason is trying to use a deactivated credit card at the vending machine. Thought you'd like to know. Leo didn't smile. He felt a profound sense of relief, but also a weight. He had his revenge, but more importantly, he had his father's legacy. He stood up and walked to the front door. He took the resident contribution agreement. Beatrice had forced him to sign and tore it into small, neat pieces. He stepped out onto the porch, the evening air cool and fresh. As he looked down the driveway, he saw a small, orange light in the distance, the neon sign of the cheap motel where the people who had tried to break him were now realizing that the world didn't owe them a living. Leo went back inside and locked the door. For the first time in a year, the house felt warm. He had a lot of work to do. The HVAC was still acting up, and the mahogany table needed a fresh coat of wax. But he had time. He had all the time in the world, and he certainly didn't have to worry about the rent. "Would you like me to expand on the legal poison pill Leo used, or perhaps describe the auction of the luxury items he recovered?"